Welcome to English 4E, class 32. Today we are working on K39. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry, my apologies. My phone was not in all the way. This is English 4E, class 32, assignment K39. We are right in the middle of unit 4. I am Jillian Percy, and here is my contact information. As always, PowerPoint is a little bit slow to load up. I'm not sure why. Okay, Facebook and YouTube are the exact same address, capital G, capital P, ERCY space, capital W, AHSA. If you are looking for previous recordings, you can go onto YouTube. I have things loaded there. I actually recorded an early morning one that is on there now because I missed it due to sickness. So if you're like, hey, I think we've missed something, that's what it is. It should already hopefully be loaded onto YouTube if you're looking for that. Okay. If you want to talk to me while I'm on air and ask me a question about what I'm teaching today, 1-800-465-7144. If you want to talk to me at any other time about an assignment, 1-800-667-3703. And my extension number is 2211. When you're sending assignments, please send them to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. Always include your name, the course name, the assignment number, and the name. I have like 4 different courses that I'm responsible for, so it's easy to get things mixed up. So always let me know what it is, okay? All right, today's work, we are going to understand the characteristics of 3 types of resumes, look at some sample resumes for ideas, understand what to write in each section of the resume, utilize an organizer to create a rough draft of a resume, and then utilize a computer program to create a good copy of a resume. Okay, so this is the following part, well, not following, it's next to it, is an excerpt from what's called the Ontario Skills Passport, which is a document produced in this province by the government. It outlines the variety of skills and habits that workers in Ontario should have in order to be successful in the workplace. You are to take a look through the material included. Now, I have just included screenshots, but you could absolutely go to this site itself and pull things up. The big thing is if you're, say, re-entering the workforce after being away for a while, or you're having trouble finding jobs, this can be a great thing to kind of look through and see, hey, what are some areas that maybe I need to improve on? How could I improve on them? That kind of thing. So the skills in the OSP are essential skills that enable people to perform tasks required by their occupation and other activities of daily life. These skills provide people with a foundation for learning other skills and enhance their ability to change. Skill levels are provided for each skill. So, in other words, like the kind of math you might need to do to be a bookkeeper would be different from the kind of math you might need to do to be a finance clerk, which might be different than if you were going to be an accountant, which might be different than if you're going to be, say, an IRS type auditor sort of thing, right? So, not every job is going to require the highest level of every skill. Okay, I'm sorry, hang on a second. Yeah, so skills are things like your reading, your writing, document use. Document use is what we sometimes think of as graphic media, posters, signs, graphs, charts, all those kind of thing. Computer use, oral communication. Numeracy would be things like money math, scheduling or budgeting or accounting, measurement and calculations. For example, jobs like construction use that kind of stuff all the time. Data analysis, the collection and analysis of data in numerical form, numerical estimation, the production of estimates in numerical terms. That kind of thing gets used for event organization, for proposal creation, construction, building, all sorts of things uses estimation. Thinking skills, job, task, planning and organizing, decision making, the making of any type of decision using appropriate information, right? Certain kinds of jobs have very specific criteria for how you make decisions about what to do. Problem solving, which could be something as simple as, you're on a job site, try to figure out what's going on with the machine, or much bigger problems that might involve something that's going wrong in an entire factory. Finding information, the use of a variety of sources, including written text, people, computerized databases, and information systems. Basically, being able to do research, right? Um, skill levels are associated with the workplace tasks and not the workers performing those tasks. In other words, the job requires this level. You might have a much higher level, but that's what the job requires. Work habits. The OSP also includes a section on work habits since it's important for everyone to have good work habits as well as the appropriate skills. Please note there are no skill levels associated with OSP work habits. The work habits included in the OSP are listed below. Okay. Working safely, working in a manner that prevents injury to self and others, reporting unsafe conditions, participating in health and safety as required, using and wearing all required protective equipment. One time when I was a very young teacher, I got in trouble because I was carrying a student desk up the stairs by myself. And one of the custodians was like, A, that's my job, and B, that's not safe. So sometimes we are not always aware of what's considered safe and what's not. Teamwork, working willingly with others, showing respect for the ideas and opinions of others. And that means like, even if you disagree with them, still being respectful and still being polite. Taking responsibility for his or her share of the work, right? A lot of times there's jobs that need to be shared at an office or at a workplace. Not always choosing the easiest job or the shortest job is kind of helpful because it contributes to good feeling. And that way your skills are getting used in a way that benefits everybody. Contributing to the team effort by sharing information, resources, and expertise. In other words, you're kind of coming to the table assuming, hey, I know some things, I have access to some resources, I have stuff I can contribute to this. Sometimes people feel so sort of unself-confident that they aren't aware that they might have some really useful information that could actually help their coworkers and their business. Reliability, being punctual, following directions, giving attention to detail, using time effectively and producing work on time, and then acting in accordance with health and safety practices. And that can be something as simple as like wearing your protective eye gear, wearing protective footwear, being sure to wipe down your workspace, whatever is considered health and safety in your workplace. It can vary, right? Some places have a lot of dangerous things. You got to be very mindful of safety. Other places are a little more mellow and you don't have to be that aware, but you do need to be conscious of what's expected at your workplace. Organization. Organizing work priorities when faced with a number of tasks. That's a really common situation where, especially if you're working under minimal supervision, you may have 20 things on your plate and you've got to kind of decide what's the most important, what's most urgent, what do I need to share with people, and kind of evaluating your work and assigning it a level of what should come first, what should come next. Devising and following a coherent plan to complete a task. Some things are super easy, right? Like making the phone call to that customer, that's easy. But your boss has decided that you need to create a proposal for an upcoming new product. That's going to require you a lot more breaking the big thing down into smaller steps and scheduling them and planning them and trying to figure that out. Revising the plan when necessary to complete a task or to make improvements. Working independently, accomplishing tasks independently selecting, evaluating, and using appropriate materials, tools, resources, and activities. Keep in mind that part of accomplishing tasks independently is also knowing, hey, at this point, I don't know enough. I need to ask somebody for help or assistance or to point me in the right direction, right? It doesn't have to mean, oh, I just sit here having no clue what to do and I fake it. It means having the awareness, here's where I need help too. Using prior knowledge and experience to solve problems and make decisions. Initiative, beginning and completing tasks with little prompting, approaching new tasks with confidence and a positive attitude, seeking assistance when necessary. That's what we were talking about with working independently too. Self-advocacy. Advocacy is kind of like, it's an old-fashioned word of advocate. It used to mean like a lawyer. Being willing to speak up for yourself. It may be an issue of legal rights. It may just be an issue of fairness. Being sure to ask questions, seeking clarification when appropriate, identifying and making use of appropriate resources and supports when necessary, being proactive regarding individual rights and responsibilities where appropriate. That can be as simple as, challenging somebody making a racist remark. It may be being aware of what your healthcare benefits are, so you're able to get healthcare you might not be able to afford without it. All different levels of self-advocacy, right? Basically being able to take care of yourself and speak up for yourself. Customer service, listening effectively to determine and meet clients' needs. Sorry, they broke these things, some of the words down into weird categories here. Interacting positively with both coworkers and clients and customers, endeavoring to meet and exceed expectations, creating a positive impression of the company or the organization. Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is when you're going into business for yourself, right? You're self-employed, or you've created a small business kind of thing, which may grow into be a larger business. Recognizing and acting on opportunities, showing perseverance, being innovative and creative, being versatile and resourceful. Versatile is kind of like flexible, right? Okay, so those are kind of different types of skills. They're important to keep in mind as we're doing our resume, because one of the sections in the resume is skills. And those work habits and work skills that we just looked at might be things that you want to include in your resume. So, as mentioned briefly in the section called the letter of application or a cover letter, a resume is normally sent with a letter of application to employers in response to more permanent type of jobs that generally pay higher salaries and for which more qualifications are required. As a much more formal channel of communication, as compared to a completed application form, it is a very important aspect of any effective job search. I'm going to say it really depends, right? I think that this used to be true. Sometimes these days, everyone's asking for a resume just because they can, right? So it isn't necessarily about how much pay you're going to make. I just kind of want to give you a heads up there. A resume, which is sometimes called a curriculum vitae, but usually only in like academia, is a summary of information about you, your name, your address, your telephone number, your email address, an objective, your level of education, your work experience, any skills you may have, your interests, and at least two, I would say normally three, references. You may recall reading these same words in the section called job application forms. As mentioned, an employer will see the above noted headings with information in an application form, but in a less formal way. A resume is a much more official looking document displaying not only details about one's academic and workplace experiences, but it is also a demonstration of organizational skills. The big thing about a resume versus an application is usually very bare bones. It's white with black lines. You often don't get to pick where you're putting things or how you choose things. You have a lot more control over a resume, and you have a lot more ability to kind of emphasize your good skills and downplay your poorer skills or non-existent skills in some areas. Okay, there are three main types of resumes which can be used by a job applicant depending on your experience and the audience. There's a chronological resume, a functional resume, and a hybrid combinational resume. And they're calling a skills resume. I would call a functional one a skills resume. The chronological resume summarizes what you've accomplished, starting with the most recent job and going backwards in time. It emphasizes your education, your work experience, and the dates. The functional or combination resume emphasizes your most important work experience and responsibilities or functions, regardless of date. That one's really useful if you've job hopped a lot and maybe if you're applying to a lot of different types of jobs. The skills resume emphasizes the skills you've acquired through work experience. Producing a resume on paper is still the most common way to go. Even when you're applying online, what you often will do is attach your completed resume to email. So it's still something you kind of need to have. Examples of websites you can check out are www.ammsa.com or also www.simplyhired.ca. These ones have been designed to promote an Aboriginal workforce. There are, of course, all sorts of other websites we're going to talk about devoted to career planning and the job search process. You can even submit your resume to some websites and some employers who can take a look online. Okay. Chronological, functional, and hybrid. I know they separated functional and skills. I would say functional is a type of skills, really. Okay, so here's an example of a chronological resume. The work experience is listed in order of the date. So here they've got July 2016 to the current time, August 2014 to April 2017, February 2012 to December 2013. And you can see we're not going right down to the individual date. If the month is kind of category enough, but the date is prominent, right? And the reason is then the employer can look for giant holes. That's one of the education things. Here, they've put education at the bottom. It's best suited, this type of resume, for someone who's got a lot of work experience. The skills are listed under each job that they've done. They're not organized in a one spot. They do have this kind of skill in general, but not the way a functional resume would do it. The big thing with this is it's kind of the most typical type of resume. And they said it was best suited for those with lots of work experience. I would say that's true in some ways, but this is kind of the default resume. So a lot of times it's useful to use it even if you don't have a lot of work experience, just because it's what managers and hiring resource people often are expecting to see, basically. The cons of a chronological resume, in other words, the drawbacks to it, are any periods of unemployment are going to stand out. Even if it's something like, okay, you were a mom and you stayed home with your kids for 6 years, it still kind of stands out. And there's always people who look down on that kind of thing. They're not supposed to, right? But there are people who might not hire you if they notice giant spots where you weren't working. The other big thing is it's kind of assuming that your most relevant experience was also the one that was most recent, right? But what if you hated your last job and are changing job categories? Then your most recent experience may not be very relevant at all to what you're trying to get. And then it can look a little bit odd. It also may not showcase talents and skills that you have that are useful, but that you didn't get in a workplace, for example. All right, so here is a functional resume. Um, it's interesting though, this one was shown on a certain website, JobScan, but they highly, highly recommend not using a functional resume. And the reason is because some hiring executives absolutely hate them, and just even seeing the format will kind of turn them off. So that is something to be mindful of if you're applying to places. Um, However, having said that, I think it really works here because the job seeker has not really been in the job market very long, like very, very minimal. If you look at work experience, they worked freelance from March of one year to January of the next year. So they've only been out of school for about a year. Having said that, they have some really great skills. They've got programming languages like Java and Python. They know how to do web development. They know how to operate database systems. They can utilize software development tools. Those are super strong skills. In that particular field that he's looking for, that might be really useful. Um, Having said that, people are aware that somebody's a new student, and they're often willing to give students a chance to develop work experience by hiring them for some sort of entry-level job. Here he put education kind of in the middle. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I feel like it should be higher for this kind of uh, resume because it would emphasize that he's got the training. Bachelor of Science in Computer Science is a challenging kind of post-secondary education to get. He also can point out that his GPA was 3.6. All these kind of things are really useful. For this particular guy, I think the functional resume works really well. Having said that, the cons of it are, as I said, recruiters hate it. The big thing is it does conceal information. If you have had giant chunks of unemployment for one reason or another, it is a good way to hide it, but recruiters are aware of that and they're kind of looking for it. So it's tricky. Some of the recruiters were saying things like, well, you're taking information out of context, or, well, it's easier to BS your way through to make things sound glamorous. And that's absolutely true, right? And that is kind of why it got developed. Having said that, if the reason you've had unemployment isn't because you're constantly getting fired, but it's because of valid things like, oh, I stayed home to take care of children, that kind of thing, it is maybe still acceptable to use, right? Um, some job applicants have used functional resumes to cover big gaps in their employment, to bloat their skills. In other words, to blow it up to exaggerate them, or to hide their lack of experience. It's kind of easy to do because the main focus of a functional resume is on skills rather than on the career history. So use this one with caution. You'd have to have really strong skills for it to be a valid choice, I think. Now, there's what we call a combination or a hybrid resume. And in that way, it's organized both chronologically, but also by categories. It will usually include skills acquired, and it's often a good choice for those who've had some experience, but maybe not a whole lot of work experience. It can also be really good for those who've had some sort of specific training they might want to show off, like you've just gotten your heavy machinery training, or you've just got, I forget what the category is, you're now legal to drive a school bus, but you haven't had any experience doing it. That's something an employer might be looking for, but wouldn't show up under work experience. So that's where a combination resume could be really helpful. So here's one example of a hybrid combination resume. And this is for somebody who is a wedding planner. So they've got a professional summary up top, relevant skills, work history is still there, just kind of downplayed. It's not the first thing you see. Here they've got some professional skills, their education, and their certifications. So this is a nice compromise for some people. If you haven't had a lot of work experience and you have what you consider really strong skills or some really strong certifications and training that you want to show off, this can be one way to do it. Okay, here's the actual assignment. Key question number 39, developing my resume. This one is worth 30 marks. It's going to be 10 marks for the rough copy and then 20 marks for the final copy. Your task with this assignment will be to develop a chronological resume of your own using the template provided, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes, and based on the information provided along with the sample. However, if you've already got a resume done, perhaps from an earlier course, just because you've been looking for work, take a close look at it and just revise it to match the categories, especially if you haven't used it for a while and you've got something new that you want to add to it, like some new work experience or some new training. The template on the next page, when completed, will be a rough copy only. Then you're to revise and edit the rough copy and produce a final copy on a computer. Remember that your resume is used to show an employer that you are the best possible person for the job. So it has to be as professional looking as possible and include all your qualifications and positive characteristics. You want to make it look really great. Okay, here are some points to keep in mind. Your name and address can either be centered at the top of the page or located at the left-hand margin. It's kind of just like we talked about with modified block versus regular block. It's fine to have everything lined up on the left, but it's also fine to have like your name centered because it can really capture attention. Your objective is something specific you're hoping for. We'll talk more about that in a minute. When you are listing information in the education and work experience sections, make sure you start with the most recent stuff first and then go slowly backwards in times. That is key for any chronological resume. It sounds funny, but if you do it in the other direction, it's going to throw off the reader. One more point. If you've been in the work field for a really long time, like me, for example, I don't put together a resume and include every single job I did since I left high school. Like I worked in bookstores for a little bit way back when. I don't bother including them, and I wouldn't unless I was looking at a bookstore again, right? I worked at a pizza restaurant. I don't include that in my teaching resume. So if you've had a lot of work experience, you may need to kind of do an arbitrary cutoff of, hey, here's the last 15 years, here's the last 20 years. Because people are staying in the workforce a lot longer these days, you may not want to have, hand in a 5-page resume of every single job you've ever had if you've been working for a long time. You want to list all the skills you have, leadership, organization, list up to 3 interests, List 3 references if you can. A reference is a person that knows you fairly well and would say some good things about you if they were called upon by an employer. Example of references are things like high school teachers, former employers, supervisors. Include the person's name, their job title, if applicable, address, and telephone number. You should not normally use any family members or relatives as references if possible. I'm going to point out in our area, sometimes people are working in places that are very small. You might have an auntie or an uncle as your boss. If that's the case, it's okay to use that person as a reference because they also know you as an employee. They don't just know you as, oh, my favorite little niece, right? It's a different thing. So that's something to keep in mind too. As an option for references, you can simply put the words available on request. It really depends. A lot of places won't even call you in for an interview unless they can see them, but many places call the references after they call you in for an interview, so it isn't really a big deal. They will let you know if they want them right away. Here is a sample resume following the format that we're asking you to do for this particular assignment. This is not necessarily the only way to do it. I've shown you some and I'm going to show you some more, but this is what we're doing for this assignment. So they've centered their name and their address. They've got their telephone number. They've got their email. Only include your email if you check your email. If you never check your email, don't include it because they could send you a job offer and you wouldn't even see it. Objective: to apply my skills in a community-based organization committed to the well-being of young people. Education: 2022 OSSD, which is your high school diploma, Spruce Island Distance Education Center. 2021 First Aid CPR Training, St. John Ambulance. Because we've asked you to put it here, go ahead and put it here. I'm just going to say, if I were doing my own resume, I would not give my education that much prominence unless I had just graduated from high school or like just graduated from post-secondary, right? If I just got my nursing degree and I don't have any nursing experience, then I would put it first. But if I had any kind of work experience in the field I'm trying to get the job for, I would put work experience up top and I would put education somewhere else. Okay, work experience here, instead of doing it kind of vertically, they've done it horizontally. July to August 2021, youth counselor, they put where they worked and what they did. January to May 2021, receptionist, where they worked and the things they did. Skills, leadership, organization, word processing, OG Cree language. Interests and resources. This is a very bare bones kind of resume. I would want to beef this up, which I'll talk about a little bit more. It also has a bit of an old-fashioned feel, and I don't know how to describe that exactly, except that I will show you some more recent resumes, and maybe you'll kind of get an idea of what I mean. This is the rough outline that is included with your unit. This is what we're expecting you to use for your rough copy. This is the one that is worth 10 marks. These lines up here are for you to put your name, address, telephone number, all that. Then you'd write your objective, then tell me your education, your work experience, your skills, your interests, and your references. Okay, here is a rubric for how I would be marking your rough copy. Did you follow the resume formatting? If you didn't follow it at all, that's an R. Poor effectiveness, D. Some effectiveness, C. Effectively, B. Very effectively, A. Shows awareness of your audience, your purpose, and your tone. Shows little awareness, shows poor awareness, some awareness, good, and then excellent. Word choices show active verbs, consistent verb tense, and good description. Rarely shows those things is an R, occasionally shows them as a D, sometimes as a C, B is usually, and almost always or always is an A. Rough copy meets the assignment criteria and is handwritten. Rarely meets the criteria R, occasionally meets it D, meets it with some effectiveness, C, usually meets it with a B, really effectively meets it with an A. The good copy is done a little bit differently because we're asking you to do this a little bit different from the rough to the good. Still, the top few are the exact same. The difference is at the bottom. Good copy shows evidence of revisions in word choice, grammar, and phrasing. I will be looking for this. A lot of people hand me in the exact same as the rough copy as in the good copy. Nothing has changed at all. And I always lower the marks when that happens because you haven't followed the writing process steps, which is a huge part of this course. Also, making sure the good copy's been edited for spelling, punctuation, and capitalization mistakes. Obviously, everybody makes a few mistakes here and there, but sometimes you can see somebody has really not spent any time trying to revise or even look at the punctuation. Um, I will be looking for these things. It's only one part of your mark. It's not the whole thing. I know sometimes kind of people get stressed out like, oh, I'm not a very good speller. Yeah, it's not the end of the universe, right? No one's going to fail an assignment just because you're not a great speller. Even if you weren't good at spelling or punctuation or capitalization, it's only one category. Having said that, if you were applying for a job, those kind of things might turn off a potential employer. So you do want to kind of get into the habit of checking those things or getting a friend who's really good at that, checking those things so that you can always put your best foot forward when you're doing a resume. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of go through each section to talk about how to do them. The objective section. Key elements of explaining a career objective. You would want to specify what kind of position or job title you're looking for, the industry or the field. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. Skills and qualities that you possess that would make you good for this job, and then possibly long-term goals if it's relevant, right? If your long-term goal is to retire to Hawaii, don't mention that here, okay? Has to be relevant to the job. Some sample objective statements would be things like objective to obtain a position as a cashier where I can use my strong interpersonal skills and high energy levels effectively. Or aiming to apply my strong analytical and creative skills to contribute to the success of a dynamic marketing team. Objective, seeking a position as a finance clerk in your company to utilize my educational qualifications, bookkeeping, and organizational skills for mutual growth and success. So those are some examples. The education or the training section. I like having education and training because that way you can include a lot of different kinds of training you might have received on a job, but that aren't big enough to be like a diploma or a Bachelor of Arts or that kind of thing. So that would be things like maybe you got a first aid certification, lifeguarding certification, heavy machinery certification, any kind of specialty types of driver's license, those can be useful. And then things like suicide prevention, addiction certification, firefighting training, training in specific computer skills like Microsoft Excel. You only know what you've been through, but there may be a lot of things that maybe were just a day long or a half a day that you did at a workplace that still would be useful to put in this section, especially if you received some sort of certificate or verification like for first aid. Skills section. I am not personally crazy about skills sections because I think they're so easy to just put something really vague that's pretty hard to prove. So I would be very specific. I wouldn't just write word processing. I would write something more like excellent at using MS Word to create a variety of documents, such as letters, agendas, programs, posters, and business documents. That is a little more specific and makes it sound like you actually have used it and kind of know what you're doing. If you used a lot of other programs besides MS Word, like I have used MS Word plus Google Docs plus whatever other programs, mention that because then they know maybe they use something unusual, but you've used it and they're like, oh, hey, we don't have to train her. She would already have all those skills. That's great. Other possible skills that might have work-related usage is second language skills. It's really popular. If you have more than one language, by all means, put it down here. You would also want to put down how fluent you are, like good at reading and writing in this particular language. Skills with specific computer software programs or applications, web design skills, specific skills in skilled trades like welding, construction, auto repair, any kind of performing arts skills that might be useful to the job. Dance, public speaking, singing, musical instrument. For example, as a teacher, it sounds odd, but some of those things are useful as a teacher. Any office specific skills that you've practiced that might be useful. Filing, organizing, note taking, keyboarding speed, any business specific skills that would be appropriate to the job you're applying for. Point of sale skills, merchandising, inventory, stocking, sales abilities, all those kind of things, things that are very specific. Okay, the other thing they were talking about, and I kind of liked how they did this, is personal skills versus professional skills. Personal skills are things like critical thinking, problem solving, oral and written communication skills, leadership, and time management. Professional skills are more job specific. Things like marketing skills, presentation competency, computer literacy, other languages, research expertise. So I'm going to kind of go over some of these possibilities. Sometimes we don't realize that we have a skill that's valuable until we see it somewhere else. So I'm sort of hoping to kind of jog your memory and go, oh, hey, wait, I'm good at that. That's something I can add to my resume. Okay, so here is personal skills section. Up top are the big headings, and these are things that are pretty typically looked for by recruiters and people who hire people. So critical thinking skills, words that you might want to use in your skills section tied to some sort of activity would be things like curiosity, creativity, desire to learn, flexibility is a big one, close observation, open-mindedness, resourcefulness, willingness to trial, problem solving skills, collaboration, patience, research, attention to detail, analytical, leadership skills, flexibility comes up again, time management skills, team building skills, risk taking skills, time management skills, they've kind of expanded on that. Things like focus, delegation, organization, prioritization, goal setting. Those are all things that you might have. You might have it not just from work. Maybe you are the coordinator for the baseball league in your area. So you have all sorts of leadership and time management skills. It just wasn't in your work. Well, then that's great. You want to make sure to put that down because it is still valuable wherever you learned it. Professional skills. These were listed as some very common skills that people are looking for in jobs. Marketing skills like campaign management, public relations skills, sales skills, SEO, SEM, that I think is search engine stuff, data visualization, presentation skills, graphic design skills, public speaking skills, report creation, public relations skills. Again, it shows up twice. Computer skills like knowing how to use Excel, PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, Publisher, Photoshop, any kind of computer language, that's super valuable as well. Office skills, filing, typing, data entry, telephone skills, record management. I'm sure there's things that I'm not thinking of that could be added there. So those are all things that could go into your skill section on your resume. If, by the way, I can see I'm getting a little, I've got about 13 minutes, but anyways, if I do happen to run out of time, I'll just kind of spill it over into tomorrow's. So don't worry too much if I do have to kind of end. Interests. Okay. You're going to need to do it just because we've included it. But in my real life, and if you were using this resume to actually try and get a job, I would no longer include interests. It used to be very typical, but I do not find it useful. I don't find it's typically used anymore. And it could even be kind of off-putting because it include items that are off topic. Like maybe you like to surf, but the person who's hiring you just assumes that anyone who surfs is a playboy who, isn't very bright. Well, meanwhile, you could be, of course, super intelligent, super reliable, but they see that interest and they have a stereotype in their head, and all of a sudden they're no longer thinking of you as a viable candidate. So, for the most part, in real life, I would not use interests. Having said that, for the purposes of this assignment, yes, you'll need to put it down. But I would only include interests that connect to the job. So if you're applying for a job in graphic design, then an interest in anime is super helpful. That's great. Maybe you're drawing some anime. Maybe you're very familiar with all the formats in anime. If you're applying for a job as a cashier, it's probably not that relevant, unless maybe you're a cashier at a comic book shop, in which case knowing all about anime and manga and all that kind of stuff could be helpful. So think about what kind of job you're applying for and what kind of interests do you honestly have? You don't want to make things up, but what do you honestly have that might be relevant for that job? Okay, work experience section. This is the heart of your resume, okay? This is where you should be putting the most effort, the most time, because this is what the employers are really, really, really going to be looking for. Typically, you would list 3 to 4 point form sentences stating what you did at the job. Try to avoid kind of vague language such as responsible for, which more is kind of saying what you should have been doing, not what you actually did do. Even if the skills seem really obvious and like, oh my gosh, everybody knows that you do this. Sure, absolutely. But spelling it out for your potential employer is helpful. A, they're getting to see your writing skills. Two, they're understanding for sure, well, you really did do the job because you know all the ins and outs. You also always want to start with the verb, a strong verb. So it's the first thing they see. And you want to make sure you don't repeat the verb over and over again. You want to make sure you're kind of varying it so they can see that you've got a whole bunch of skills. So even if it's being simple like a waitress, okay, I have seated customers, took orders accurately, including substitutions, suggest sold drinks, desserts, and specials, operated point of sales machines, bussed tables, assembled salads, and made drinks when needed. Everyone knows that waitresses do that, but listing them all out shows the employer that you know it as well and that you know what things are valuable for that person. This is a list of some great verbs. It's kind of related a little bit to skills. Verbs are more actions that you know how to do, whereas a skill is more like an activity. Okay, it's very similar, but not quite the same. Office work, you could use verbs like filed, organized, alphabetized, recorded, tracked, phoned, monitored, answered, screened, delegated, created, planned. Creative work, right? Things like designed, sketched, planned, drew, painted, illustrated, proposed, sang, performed, acted, auditioned, crafted. Skilled trains could be very specific. These are kind of general ones. Operated, drove, utilized, carried, followed, assembled, cut, welded, built, constructed, painted, designed, and then various different types of leadership skills, managed, organized, delegated, supervised, oversaw, implemented, monitored, interviewed, hired, administered, coordinated, and initiated. Okay. So I want to point one more thing out. I am a little bit on the older side than some of you probably. To me, this resume template has a little bit of an outdated look to it. It looks like what I would expect to have seen when I was first looking for work, which is like back in the 90s. Okay. I would take a bit of time to look at more current resumes if you're actually looking for work. If you're just doing this for assignment, don't worry about it. But if you're actually looking for work, I would look around a little bit to have a better sense of what's considered more typical these days. Having said that, again, this is for real world stuff. These are some tips and warnings. Do not put your photo on your resume. You'll see it all the time. I don't know if the state has different kind of standards about this, but unless you're trying to get a job in modeling or acting, it's generally considered kind of inappropriate to put your picture on your resume. It could result in them automatically rejecting your application because they don't want to be accused of hiring you either because of your looks or or not hiring you because of your looks. Be cautious of any kind of bold, fancy colors in your resume. It may end up photocopied and none of that may show. What I would do if I really wanted to use some fancy colors is do a black and white photocopy and see if it affects it badly. If it looks still good, that's fine. Again, be cautious. I wouldn't bother using fancy paper. Just use plain paper. Generally, when people are doing fancy paper, it's because they don't trust their own training or experience. I already talked about the skills of resume. So if I was trying to get work at a sports equipment store, then I might totally put that I've got interests in hockey, baseball, and rollerblading. But I probably wouldn't put down that my interests were Lego sets and watercolor painting because it doesn't have any relationship to sports or to that job. Okay, I've got a tiny little bit of time. Talking about how to use the resume in computers. I know not everybody is feeling super computer savvy. Remember that because you are a WASA student, you have access to Google Docs and all the other Google programs, okay? If you've not yet accessed your Google email that you have through WASA, contact me or contact Katie and help us get you set up. Because once you've got access to that, you've got access to a whole bunch of apps that can be really useful to use, okay? Also, Google Docs has some lovely templates of resumes that are already there. They're already all set up and formatted. It is totally fine to use those to have a nice clean format that can work. Now, having said that, you can do your word processing in whatever program you're comfortable with. Microsoft Word is fine. Google Docs is fine. If you have a Mac and you want to use, I think it's Papers. If there is some other program that you have that you love, by all means, you can use whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay, so if you are using Google Docs, again, you would open into your computer email. Your little icon would show up with your initial, and then next to it would be the little dots. Those are representative of the apps. If you click on that, all the different apps that are available to you will show up. And you can see I could lower this down. There would be more, okay? But what we're looking for is this blue icon here that says Docs. Google Docs has some resume templates that you can use, okay? So once you're in there, what would come up is this screen. And you have the possibility of just setting up your own. If you feel very comfortable with setting up documents, by all means, go ahead and set up your own. However, you can also grab a couple of the resume they've got here. Their sections aren't the same, and we had to kind of add some. I'll kind of show you what I did. Let me see if I can get it to come up. Hang on a second. For some reason, PowerPoint is not as good for this. Hang on. As PowerPoint. I'm no, sorry. PowerPoint is not so good as Google Slides. Oh, no, that's not. Why is it doing that to me? Hang on a sec. All right, I'm going to skip over that for a second and come back to it. Open up the resume template you like, select it all with a cursor and copy it. The reason I did that was there is formatting there that is hard to get rid of. What I did was open up a blank document and dump all the resume information I just grabbed, put it there. It seems to undo the limits. They're still there, but I can fix things or change things easier. Hang on, I can see what's going on. I don't think, all right. I forgot. I'm still in PowerPoint, which wants to open Microsoft instead of opening Google because they are rivals. Hang on a second. See, so here's my item. Where's Google Docs? It's somewhere slightly different for me because it's not one of the ones I use most often. Okay. Okay, sorry. All the pauses are me trying to like remember passwords and things like that so that I can get in here. Okay. Okay, so this is what we're saying. You can pull up the blank document. You could also pull up this resume or this other resume. I am going to grab this one just to kind of get us started. Now, if you are happy with this, you do not have to change a thing. It does not matter to me. You can just go in and then you start backspace and you would put your name on. It's much the same as what we did yesterday where we used the letter template. You can change the colors. You can make it into black if you wanted to. If you wanted something jazzy like red, you absolutely can do that. Pretty sure you can change even the, hang on, I've messed that up somehow. I think you can change the color for this. Hang on a second. Let me see. Huh. I feel convinced there's a way to do it, but I'm not sure at the moment. Here, instead of putting skills, I would change this so this is my objective. And then I would put whatever my objective is. Here, I would put work experience. If you're including volunteer experience, I would write that work and volunteer experience. And then when you're listing that particular experience, I would write volunteer somewhere in it so that it doesn't look like you're trying to mislead anybody, but you want to include that particular experience. Some jobs are pretty well known for being very challenging and they kind of know what sort of experience it's going to involve. So don't discount something just because it was something that you did for volunteer work. Education, we don't have awards. We do have interests. and skills. I'm forgetting the actual order right here, but cap lock, nope. Oh, wait, hang on. Sorry, it disappeared on me. Hang on. Okay, so this happens to you. It just happened to me. Go over here to the undo button. Undo, undo, undo. I'm going back to where it was. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of try and do this without messing it up. Interests. Oh, no, I did. Okay. And then if I wanted to add one more section, which I think I would need to, let me see if I can grab the whole thing here. I think I can grab this, copy it, and then give myself a little space and enter it. Paste. Okay, it did. Um, this line is part of the header, so that is why it is showing up again. There's a lot of discussion about whether a resume should be only one page or if it's allowed to be more than one page. You, especially if you're older and have a lot of work experience, it is okay to make a resume that's 2 pages. However, I would try and make sure that the stuff that was most important for this job was on the first page because they might barely look at the second page. Okay. We are running short on time, so I didn't quite get through everything today. I will pick this up tomorrow. If you feel like you have enough information and you're comfortable doing word processing, by all means, go ahead and run with this and get started. If you're still like, ooh, I still don't have enough information, I will come back tomorrow and finish explaining how to set things up, okay? Thank you so much for showing up, and we will get together tomorrow and look at the next assignment.